The security guard sized me up like I was trying to sneak out with stolen goods. Instead of pushing a mop bucket, "You're the new cleaning lady?" His tone implied I might also be casing the place, actually. "I prefer domestic maintenance specialist," I said, deadpan. "But yes, I'm here to make sure your billionaire boss doesn't live in his own filth." "Where are you watching from today?" Drop your location in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe. 3 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be standing in the marble-floored lobby of Morrison Manor at 6 in the morning, armed with industrial-strength bleach and a bruised ego, I would have laughed. Back then, I was Margaret Thompson, co-owner of Thompson's Hardware, married to Tom for 32 years, living a perfectly ordinary life in suburban Cleveland. Now, at 54, widowed, and desperate enough to scrub toilets for a 28-year-old who probably made more in a single day than I'd earned in my entire life, here I was. Tom's sudden heart attack had been devastating, but discovering that our store was drowning in debt he'd hidden from me for 2 years, that was the knockout punch. The bank took everything except my dignity and some days, even that felt negotiable. "Mrs. Thompson." A crisp voice pulled me out of my mental inventory of failures. A woman in her 40s approached, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun that probably gave her headaches. Her navy suit screamed expensive. Her smile screamed fake. "I'm Diana Morrison, Mr. Morrison's stepmother. I'll be showing you around today, stepmother." She looked barely older than the billionaire himself. I'd seen this movie before. Young woman marries rich older man, gets widowed, inherits everything. Classic. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mrs. Morrison," I said, trying to summon what was left of my manners. "It's Miss Morrison now," she corrected, her smile tightening. "My husband passed away 6 months ago, so we were both members of the Unwanted Widows Club though. Something told me her membership came with far better benefits than mine." She led me through rooms that belonged in magazines, Persian rugs worth more than my old house, crystal chandeliers that would take me a week to clean, artwork so intimidating I feared breathing too close. "Daniel inherited everything when his grandfather passed," Diana explained. "The house, the companies, the fortune. He's very particular about his privacy and expects his space maintained to exact standards. Translation: don't touch anything expensive. And if you break it, we'll garnish your wages until you're 90. The previous cleaning service was let go," she continued. "They weren't suitable for our needs. They probably asked for a living wage." We climbed a curved staircase that belonged in a Hollywood movie. At the top, Diana gestured to a long hallway lined with doors. "The master suite is off limits unless specifically requested. Guest rooms need attention twice weekly. There's a small apartment above the garage where you'll be staying during your shifts." I processed this. 5 days a week in paradise. Today's remembering what my real life looked like. Daniel prefers live-in staff. He works unusual hours and values having people available when needed. We reached the end of the hallway. Diana opened a door marked private. "This is the family portrait gallery. It needs dusting weekly, but be extremely careful. These paintings are irreplaceable." I nodded, trying to look like someone who had never accidentally knocked over a display of paint cans. "In her own store, I'll leave you to familiarize yourself with the layout," Diana said. "Your uniform and supplies are in the utility room downstairs. First shift starts tomorrow at 6 a.m. sharp." After she left, I stood alone in the portrait gallery, surrounded by oils of people who'd probably never worried about mortgages or medical bills. Stern men in suits, elegant women dripping in jewels, children who looked like they'd been born wearing trust funds. I was dusting the frame of a particularly imposing patriarch when I froze. A portrait stopped me cold. A young woman with dark hair and bright green eyes, wearing a blue dress that probably cost more than my car. She was beautiful, sophisticated, clearly painted by a high-end artist. But it was her face that made my hands shake, nearly dropping the cleaning cloth. It was my sister, Sarah, who disappeared when she was 8 and I was 12. Sarah, who vanished from our backyard during a game of hide and seek 42 years ago. Sarah, who had been declared dead after 7 years of searching with nothing turned up. Sarah, who was apparently alive and somehow part of this family. The nameplate at the bottom of the frame read, "Sarah Morrison, beloved wife and mother." What the hell? I whispered before I could stop myself. I stood there staring at the portrait, my mind racing through explanations that made less and less sense the longer I looked. Maybe Sarah just looked like this woman. Maybe it was some absurd coincidence. Maybe I was finally cracking under the pressure and imagining things. But no, I knew every freckle on Sarah's face, every expression she made when she was concentrating. This woman wasn't a look-alike. This was my little sister, grown up, stunning, and wearing jewelry that could probably feed a small country. Is there a problem? I spun around. A man stood in the doorway, tall, dark hair, The kind of bone structure you only get from excellent genetics and maybe a personal trainer or two. This had to be Daniel Morrison, the billionaire boy king himself. My voice came out as a croak. I cleared my throat. I was just cleaning the portraits, sir. You were staring at that particular painting like you've seen a ghost. You have no idea. She's very beautiful, I managed. Your wife? My mother? The word hit me like a physical blow. This stranger who probably bought companies the way normal people bought coffee, was Sarah's son. My nephew. I'm sorry for your loss, I said automatically. His expression tightened. She's not dead. Now I was really confused, but Diana says a lot of things. His tone suggested he and his stepmother weren't exactly mailing each other Christmas cards. My mother disappeared 8 years ago. No note, no explanation. She just vanished 8 years ago. That would make it the second time Sarah had disappeared from someone's life. That must have been devastating, I said carefully. Daniel studied me with eyes so much like Sarah's it made my chest ache. You look familiar, he said. Have we met? My heart thudded painfully. I don't think so, sir. I would have remembered, Daniel, and yes, you would have. He stepped closer to the portrait. My mother had a sister once, before she met my father. She used to tell me stories about her when I was little. What kind of stories? I asked. About growing up poor in Cleveland. His voice softened. About a sister who protected her, who taught her to be brave when their parents fought. She said her sister was the only person who ever made her feel safe. Tears stung my eyes. I had tried so hard to protect Sarah the night before she disappeared. I'd promised her I'd always keep her safe. I had failed spectacularly. What was her sister's name? I whispered, Margaret. But everyone called her Maggie. The room tilted. Somehow impossibly Sarah had told her son about me. Sir, I said, my voice shaking. I need to ask you something, and I know it's going to sound insane. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Try me. I took a breath and pointed at the portrait. Why does your mother look exactly like my sister, who disappeared 42 years ago? For a moment, he just stared. Then he looked at the portrait, then back at me, his face draining of color. What's your full name? He asked quietly. Margaret Thompson. But everyone calls me Maggie. Daniel sank into a chair like his legs had simply given out. Oh my God, he murmured. I said. My own voice trembling. We need to have a very long conversation. 20 minutes later. We were in Daniel's study and I was still trying to process what he'd told me. Sarah hadn't died. He said. She'd been taken. My father found her wandering alone near Pittsburgh when she was 8. Daniel explained. She was scared, dirty, couldn't remember anything about her family. He brought her home, and my grandmother took her and couldn't remember, I repeated quietly. Or wouldn't say. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo I always carried. Sarah and me at a carnival the month before she vanished, both of us sharing cotton candy. Both grinning at the camera, Sarah missing her two front teeth. This is my sister, Sarah Thompson. I said. She disappeared from our backyard in Cleveland on July 15, 1983. She was 8 years old. Daniel stared at the picture for a long time. The resemblance is identical, he whispered. Because it's the same person. I held his gaze. Your father didn't find a lost child, Daniel. He took my sister. That's impossible, he shot back. My father was a good man. He wouldn't what? I said gently. Wouldn't steal a child and raise her as his own? Look at the dates. Look at the photo. Look at your mother's face. Daniel went quiet for several minutes, processing. She used to have nightmares, he said finally. She'd wake up screaming about someone named Maggie. Dad always said they were just anxiety dreams. My heart broke all over again. She was looking for me. The memories started coming back about 10 years ago. Daniel said quietly. She began asking questions about her childhood, about where she came from. Dad got defensive. Said the past didn't matter, that we were her real family now. What happened 8 years ago when she disappeared? I asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. She hired a private investigator to look into her past. Found out her real last name might have been Thompson. Dad was furious. Said she was being ungrateful, that digging into her past would destroy our family. And then she vanished. 3 days later, his voice barely rose above a whisper. I always wondered if Dad had something to do with it. But I could never prove anything. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening snap. Your father took her once before when she got too close to remembering, I said. What makes you think he wouldn't do it again? Because he's dead. Daniel looked up, his eyes hollow. He died 6 months ago. Natural causes, but something flickered in his expression. Diana's still here. What about her? I asked. Diana hated my mother, he said flatly. Always saw her as competition for Dad's affection. When Mom disappeared, Diana was the one who convinced everyone to stop looking. Said Mom probably ran off with another man. You didn't believe that? Daniel shook his head. Mom loved Dad, despite everything. She would never have just left without telling me goodbye. He suddenly stood. There's something I need to show you. He led me to a wall safe hidden behind another portrait and spun the combination. Inside were documents, photographs, and what looked like a private investigator's report. Mom left these for me before she disappeared, Daniel said. I think she knew something was going to happen. I picked up the top photograph. It was me 17 years old at my high school graduation. My parents stood beside me, all of us smiling proudly. A red arrow had been drawn pointing to my face. Underneath, in Sarah's handwriting, were the words, "My sister Maggie. I need to find her. She never stopped looking for you," Daniel whispered. My throat tightened. I sifted through more photos, shots of our old neighborhood, our parents' graves. Even a recent picture of me standing outside Thompson's Hardware. My sister had found me years ago. But something had stopped her from reaching out. The private investigator's report, I said, picking up the thick folder. What did he find? Enough to get him killed. I looked up sharply. What car accident? 3 days after Mom disappeared, Daniel said. The police said it was suspicious but couldn't prove anything. A chill slid down my spine. Who else knew about this investigation? Just Mom, he said. The investigator. And Diana. We stared at each other as the implications sank in. If Sarah had discovered the truth about her kidnapping, and if Diana had known, then Sarah's disappearance might not have been voluntary at all. Daniel, I said softly. I think your mother might be in serious danger. The next morning, I was elbow deep in bathroom tiles that probably cost more than most people's cars. When Diana appeared in the doorway like a perfectly coiffed storm cloud, Mrs. Thompson, I need to speak with you. Her tone suggested I was about to be fired. Arrested, or possibly both. I stood, still gripping my scrub brush like a makeshift weapon. Of course, Miss Morrison, I understand you've been asking questions about family matters. News traveled fast in a billionaire mansion. Daniel was showing me the portrait gallery, I said. I was curious about the paintings. Curiosity is dangerous in this house. Diana stepped inside, effectively trapping me between her and the marble wall. The Morrison family values privacy above all else. I'm just here to clean, ma'am, are you? Her smile was arctic. Because I've done some checking on you. Margaret Thompson, hardware store owner from Cleveland. Recently widowed. Recently bankrupted. Recently. Desperate. Each word landed like a slap. I don't understand what you're getting at, I said. I think you do. Diana's eyes hardened. You're here under false pretenses, aren't you? This isn't about needing work. This is about Sarah. My blood turned to ice. I don't know what you mean. Drop the act. Diana's mask finally cracked, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. You're her sister. Did you really think you could waltz in here and start asking questions without me noticing? I set the scrub brush down and faced her fully. And what if I am? Then you need to understand something very clearly. She stepped closer, lowering her voice until it was almost a hiss. Sarah is gone. She's not coming back. And if you're smart, you'll stop digging into things that don't concern you. Where is she? I demanded. Diana laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dead, for all I care, Diana said coolly. She was nothing but trouble from the day James brought her home. Always asking questions. Always wanting more than she deserved. James took her, I snapped. He kidnapped an 8-year-old child. James saved her from a life of poverty and neglect. Diana shot back. He gave her everything: education, opportunities, luxury. And how did she repay him? By hiring investigators. By trying to destroy his reputation. By trying to find her real family. Her lip curled. Her real family was here. We were all she needed. For the first time, Diana's perfect composure cracked. But it was never enough for precious Sarah. She always wanted more. Always thought she deserved better. She did deserve better, I said. She deserved the truth. The truth? Diana's voice sharpened. The truth is that Sarah was ungrateful and selfish. James loved her like his own daughter. And she threw it back in his face by insisting on these delusional stories about being kidnapped. Do you have any idea what that would have done to James's reputation? To his business? And there it was. Sarah hadn't simply disappeared. She'd been silenced to protect the Morrison family name. Where is she, Diana? I told you, dead, but you don't know for sure, do you? I watched her carefully. If you knew, you wouldn't be so worried about me being here. Diana's eyes narrowed, dangerously. You're playing a very dangerous game, Mrs. Thompson, and you're threatening me, I said. I'm giving you friendly advice. Her voice dropped to a chilling whisper. Sarah learned the hard way what happens to people who ask too many questions. The bathroom door suddenly swung open. Daniel stood there, fury radiating off him. Diana, what are you doing? Just welcoming our new employee, she said smoothly, her mask snapping back into place. Making sure she understands how things work here. I heard raised voices, Daniel said. Mrs. Thompson was asking about the family history. I was explaining our preference for privacy. Daniel looked between us, clearly unconvinced. Mrs. Thompson, are you all right? Fine, sir, I said, just learning the ropes. Diana, he said tightly, I need to speak with you, now, after they left. I sank onto the marble floor, shaking. Diana knew exactly what had happened to Sarah, and she had all but admitted the Morrison family would kill to keep their secrets. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Detective Martinez, Rosa, Tom's friend who had helped us when the hardware store was vandalized. Rosa, I said when she answered, it's Maggie Thompson. I need help, and I think someone's life might be in danger. Detective Martinez slid into a booth at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Morrison Manor, looking exasperated and worried all at once. Maggie, when you said you needed help, I thought you meant with insurance paperwork or something normal. Rosa leaned in, lowering her voice. You're talking about kidnapping, murder, conspiracy. This is way beyond a friendly favor. Rosa, please. I know how it sounds. It sounds like grief and financial stress have made you paranoid. Her tone was gentle but firm. You've been through a lot. Maybe you're seeing patterns that aren't. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos Daniel had shown me. Look at these dates. Look at the progression. Rosa flipped through the missing child report from 1983. The private investigator's notes, the photos Sarah had collected of our family. Slowly, her expression shifted from skeptical to uneasy. This is compelling circumstantial evidence, she admitted. But it's not proof of current wrongdoing. The private investigator died 3 days after Sarah disappeared, I said. Car accident. Accidents happen, Maggie. Rosa, please, my voice cracked. I'm not asking you to arrest anyone. I just need you to help me figure out what happened to my sister. She went quiet for a long moment. Finally, officially, I can't investigate a missing person case from another jurisdiction without cause. Then she sighed. Unofficially, I can make some calls. Check if there were any open investigations into James Morrison's death. See if anyone else reported Sarah missing. Thank you, I whispered. But Maggie. Rosa leaned forward, eyes serious. If even a fraction of what you're saying is true, you're putting yourself in real danger by staying in that house. I can't leave, I said. Not when I'm this close. Then at least promise me you'll check in every day. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling for backup. I promise. That evening, I was organizing cleaning supplies in the utility room when I heard voices drifting down from the kitchen above. The old heating vents carried sound perfectly. What I heard made my blood run cold. She knows too much. Diana snapped. We don't know that for certain. An older male voice replied, someone I hadn't met. She's asking about Sarah, about the investigation. She's Sarah's sister. For God's sake, of course, she knows. Then we handle it the same way we handled the other problems. My hands stopped moving. Other problems like the private investigator who died in a car accident. It's too risky. Diana continued. Daniel suspects something. If another person connected to this dies, he'll start asking questions we can't answer. Then what do you suggest? We move Sarah tonight. Somewhere she can never be found. My sister was alive. Diana had been lying when she said Sarah was dead. But for how long? The facility in Canada is secure, the male voice said. Once she's there, it won't matter what anyone suspects. Facility. They were talking about some kind of institution. And if she tells someone the truth, she's been heavily medicated for years. No one believes the ravings of a mental patient. They'd had my sister committed to keep her quiet. Fine, make the arrangements. Diana's voice was moving away. But if this goes wrong, if Daniel finds out what really happened, Daniel will never find out. Neither will the sister. Some secrets are worth protecting at any cost. I waited until the voices faded, then crept upstairs. The kitchen was empty, but I could hear Diana talking on the phone in another room. Yes, tonight. Transfer the patient to the Canadian facility immediately. No, there can't be any record of the move. Destroy all documentation. I had maybe 6 hours before they moved Sarah to someplace I might never find her. 6 hours to save my sister and get justice for everything the Morrison family had done. I pulled out my phone and called Detective Martinez. Rosa, it's an emergency. I need backup and I need it now. But as I was talking, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find Daniel standing in the doorway, his face pale with shock. I heard everything. He whispered, My God, Maggie, what have they done to her? Daniel grabbed my arm, his eyes wild with panic and rage. They've had her locked away for 8 years. My own mother. Daniel, we need to stay calm, I whispered, glancing toward the hallway where Diana might return. If they suspect we know, calm? His voice cracked. They've been drugging her, keeping her prisoner, and I've been living here like nothing happened. All those times I wondered if she was dead, and she was just trapped. The sound of Diana's heels clicking on the marble echoed from the foyer. Daniel straightened instantly, his face smoothing into a mask of casual indifference, a skill he'd clearly mastered living with. Vipers. Double quotes Mrs. Thompson, everything all right? Diana appeared, her radar for conflict always sharp, just discussing tomorrow's schedule. Daniel replied smoothly. I need the library cleaned early. Business meeting at 10 o'clock. Diana's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded. Of course, Mrs. Thompson, you should retire early tonight. Long day tomorrow. Translation, stay in your room and mind your own business while we destroy evidence. And relocate your sister. Yes, ma'am. Good night. I headed toward the staff quarters, my phone burning a hole in my pocket. Rosa was on her way, but even with police backup, we needed to know exactly where Sarah was being held before they moved her. In my small room above the garage, I paced like a caged animal. Every minute that passed brought me 1 minute closer to losing Sarah forever. I'd already lost her once to these people. I wouldn't let it happen again. A soft knock on my door made me freeze. Mrs. Thompson, it's Daniel. I opened the door to find him holding a manila folder. I went through Dad's office. Found this hidden in his safe. The folder contained medical records from Pine Haven Private Treatment Facility, 2 hours north of Cleveland. Sarah Morrison. Patient M4471, admitted 8 years ago for severe dissociative disorder and delusional thinking. Treatment, heavy sedation and isolation therapy. Isolation therapy? I muttered, my hands shaking with rage. They've been torturing her. There are financial records, too, Daniel said. Dad's been paying them $200,000 a year to keep her quiet. And Diana's been in charge of those payments since your father died. He nodded grimly. She has power of attorney over all Dad's medical decisions. Legally, she can authorize Sarah's transfer anywhere she wants. Not if Sarah's competent to make her own decisions, Maggie. After 8 years of drugs and isolation, we don't know what state she's in. I stared at the medications they'd been forcing on my sister: antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, sedatives. Enough chemicals to keep an elephant docile. We're getting her out tonight. How? Even if we reach the facility, Diana's already arranged the transfer. By the time we get there, Sarah could be on her way to Canada, then we intercept the transport. Daniel stared at me. You're talking about kidnapping. I'm talking about rescuing my sister from people who've held her prisoner for 8 years. My phone buzzed. Rosa, Maggie. I made some calls. Pine Haven has a reputation for taking patients that families want to disappear. No questions asked. Minimal oversight. If your sister's there, getting her out legally could take months. We don't have months. They're moving her tonight, then we do this carefully. I'm bringing to officers and an ambulance. If she needs medical attention after what they've done to her, Rosa, there's something else. Daniel Morrison wants to help. He's her son. A pause. Can we trust him? I looked at Daniel, who was studying the medical records with horror and determination warring on his face. Yes, we can trust him. Good. We'll need inside information about the facility's layout and security. After ending the call, Daniel and I spread out the building plans he'd printed from the county records office. Pine Haven was built like a fortress: high walls, limited access points, electronic locks on everything. There, Daniel pointed to a service entrance. Staff parking is here. Deliveries come through this gate. Less security than the main entrance. You've thought about this before. I've been trying to figure out where they took her for 8 years. Never got close enough to be sure until now. Daniel, once we do this, there's no going back. Diana will know you're involved. Your inheritance, your life as you know it. My life has been built on a lie. My mother is alive and she's been suffering while I lived in luxury bought with blood money. His jaw set determinedly. Let Diana have the money. I want my mother back. At midnight, we met Rosa and her team at a diner 5 miles from Pine Haven. The officers looked skeptical about our plan, but Rosa had apparently vouched for my sanity. Security changes shifts at 2 a.m., Daniel explained. That's our window. Skeleton crew for 30 minutes while they do handover. What about cameras? Rosa asked. I can loop the feed from the security office. Dad invested in the facility years ago. I have administrative access to their systems. Rosa raised an eyebrow. Convenient. Dad liked to keep tabs on his investments, especially ones holding family secrets. The service entrance to Pine Haven looked like something out of a horror movie: high concrete walls, topped with razor wire, security cameras every 20 feet, and floodlights bright enough to expose every flaw in humanity. Cheerful place, I muttered, pulling on the scrubs Rosa had provided. Really screams healing environment. Daniel was already working on his laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. Security systems older than I expected. Good news for us. How is it good news that they're running a prison with outdated security? Easier to hack, and his screen filled with camera feeds. Got it. I can give us a 20-minute blind spot. Rosa checked her weapon for the 3rd time. Remember, we go in quiet, find Sarah Thompson Morrison and get out. No heroics, no confrontations with staff unless absolutely necessary. What if she doesn't remember me? The question had been eating at me for hours. 8 years of drugs and isolation, what if she didn't know who I was? Then we remind her, Daniel said quietly. Whatever it takes. At 2:15 a.m. we moved. The service entrance yielded to Rose's lockpicks faster than I expected. Apparently, all those years married to a cop had taught her more than how to make coffee and tolerate shift work inside. Pine Haven was worse than the outside suggested. Sterile white halls lit by harsh fluorescent lights. The smell of disinfectant failed to mask the underlying scent of human misery and pharmaceutical desperation. Patient rooms are on the 3rd floor, Daniel whispered, consulting the building plans on his phone. Sarah's in room 347. We climbed the stairs in silence, every footstep echoing like a gunshot. At the 3rd floor landing, Rosa held up a hand to nurses at the station. They look awake. Through the door's window, I saw them, one filing paperwork, the other reading a magazine, both with inside of the elevator and main hallway. Fire stairs at the other end of the building, I whispered. Too far, Rosa said. We'd have to pass 6 other rooms, and some of these patients might not be as medicated as Sarah. Daniel studied his phone again. There's a supply closet 15 feet down the hall. If I trigger a false alarm in the east wing, they'll investigate, Rosa finished, leaving this area unguarded. Do it. 30 seconds later, an ear-splitting alarm shrieked from the far end of the building. Both nurses grabbed flashlights and hurried toward the sound. Leaving the station unmanned, we moved quickly down the hallway, passing doors marked with numbers and names, each one representing someone's broken child, lost parent, or discarded family member. Room 343, 345, 3 for 7. The door was locked, but Rosa made quick work of it. Inside, my heart nearly stopped. A small figure lay on a narrow bed, so thin and pale I almost didn't recognize her. Sarah's beautiful dark hair had been shorn short and her face was gaunt, aged beyond her actual 46 years. But it was her, my baby sister, Sarah, I whispered, approaching the bed slowly. Her eyes opened, unfocused and glazed from medication. She looked at me without recognition, then at Daniel, then back to me. Time for pills? She asked in a voice like broken glass. No, sweetheart. No more pills. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart breaking. Sarah, it's me. It's Maggie. Something flickered in her eyes. Maggie's dead. They told me Maggie died in a car accident. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. They told her I was dead to prevent her from hoping, from trying to reach out. I'm not dead, Sarah. I'm here. I found you. You're not real. She turned her face away. Nothing's real anymore. Daniel stepped forward, his voice gentle. Mom, it's Daniel, your son. We're here to take you home. Sarah's head turned back, studying Daniel's face with growing awareness. Danny. My Danny. Yes, Mom, it's me. But you're supposed to be at school. Diana said you were at boarding school and couldn't visit because I was too sick. Another lie. Another cruelty designed to isolate and break her spirit. I'm not at school anymore. Mom, I grew up and I've been looking for you. Sarah struggled to sit up, and I could see the toll 8 years had taken. Her hands shook constantly, a side effect of long-term antipsychotic use. Her movements were slow, uncertain. This isn't real, she repeated, but with less conviction. They said everyone I remembered was dead or didn't want me anymore. All lies, I said firmly. Sarah, do you remember when we were kids? You used to have nightmares about the monster in your closet. And I'd sleep on your floor to protect you. Maggie would sing to me, she whispered. Some song about mockingbirds. Hush, little baby, don't say a word, I began softly. Maggie's going to buy you a mockingbird. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Real recognition dawned in her face for the first time. Maggie? My Maggie? Yes, baby girl. Your Maggie. The alarm down the hall suddenly stopped and we heard voices approaching. Time to go, Rosa said urgently, but as we helped Sarah stand, her legs buckled. 8 years of sedation and minimal movement had left her weak as a kitten. Can you walk? Daniel asked. I don't know. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, getting closer. Wheelchair? Rosa said, grabbing one from the corner of the room. Daniel, can you carry her? As Daniel lifted his mother, Sarah looked at me with sudden panic. Maggie, they'll hurt you if they find you here. Diana said terrible things would happen to anyone who tried to help me. Let me worry about Diana, I said grimly. We'd made it halfway to the fire exit when the lights blazed on and a voice boomed through the intercom. Security breach in Sector 7. All units respond immediately. The fire alarm door slammed shut with an electronic click that meant business. Well, that's not good, I observed, watching Daniel frantically swipe his access card against the reader. Please tell me you have a plan B. Working on it, he muttered, fingers flying over his phone. The system's in lockdown mode. I need to find another way to. Heavy footsteps thundered up the main stairwell. 3 security guards and what looked like an orderly were heading straight for us. Rosa drew her weapon. Police, stay where you are. The guards hesitated. But the orderly, a massive man who probably bench-pressed patients for fun, kept coming. You can't take her, he growled. Dr. Ricks's orders. She's dangerous to herself and others. Dr. Ricks can discuss that with my lawyers, Daniel snapped. That's my mother and she's leaving with us, not without proper discharge paperwork, Sarah. Silent in the wheelchair suddenly spoke up. Marcus? She was looking at the orderly with something like recognition. Marcus, you told me Danny was dead. The big man's face reddened. Sarah, you're confused. The medications make you remember things wrong. No, her voice was growing stronger. You said my son died in a car accident when he was 16. You said that's why I had to stay here because I had no family left. Marcus glanced nervously at the guards. She's delusional. Dr. Ricks can explain. Where is Dr. Ricks? Rosa demanded. I want to speak to him immediately. He's not available. Then we're leaving. I grabbed the wheelchair handles. Sarah is a voluntary patient. She has the right to discharge herself. Actually, Marcus said with an ugly smile, she doesn't. Sarah Morrison has been declared mentally incompetent. Her legal guardian has full authority over her medical decisions. Her legal guardian? Daniel asked. Diana Morrison, Marcus said, folding his arms. And she specifically authorized us to prevent any attempts to remove the patient. Daniel's face went pale. Diana had her declared incompetent. 3 years ago, some nonsense about wanting to change her will leave money to people who didn't exist. Dr. Riss testified that she was suffering from severe delusional thinking. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Diana hadn't just wanted Sarah silenced. She'd wanted her legally erased, with Sarah declared incompetent. Diana controlled everything: her medical care, her finances, even life or death decisions. You have 30 seconds to move, Rosa said, her weapon trained on Marcus. Then I start arresting people for unlawful imprisonment. You don't have jurisdiction here. One of the security guards said. This is a private facility. I have jurisdiction. Wherever someone's being held against their will. The standoff stretched tight as wire. Then Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. It's Diana. Don't answer it, I said, but he was already swiping. Diana. What? Diana's voice was loud enough for all of us to hear. Daniel, darling, I know where you are. And I know what you're trying to do. Then you know it's over. We found her, Diana. We know what Dad did. What you've been doing, what your father did, she said calmly, was save a lost child and give her a beautiful life. What I've done is protect this family from scandal. You've tortured an innocent woman for 8 years. I've managed a family crisis. Sarah's fantasy about being kidnapped would have destroyed your father's reputation. Your inheritance, everything we've built. Sarah was listening, her breath quickening. She's lying, she whispered to me. I wasn't fantasizing. I remember now. I remember everything. Diana's voice stayed cold. Daniel, you can still walk away from this. Come home, and we'll say nothing about your misguided rescue attempt. What about Sarah? Sarah will be transferred to a secure facility where she can receive proper treatment. She'll be comfortable, well cared for, and unable to hurt anyone with her delusions. You mean unable to tell the truth? The truth is whatever we decide it is, darling. That's what having money and power means. I'd heard enough. I grabbed the phone from Daniel. Double quotes Diana. This is Maggie, Sarah's sister. You know, the one who's very much alive and very pissed off. A pause. Then, Mrs. Thompson, I was hoping we could avoid unpleasantness, lady. You haven't seen unpleasantness yet, but you will. I think you're forgetting something. She replied smoothly. You're trespassing in a private medical facility. You're attempting to kidnap a patient. And you're interfering with legal guardianship arrangements. And you're going to prison for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit murder. Diana laughed. Prove it. It's your word against mine. And I have 8 years of medical records showing Sarah's mental instability, actually. Daniel said, taking his phone back. You don't. I could hear the smile in his voice. Suddenly, I realized what he'd been doing on his phone this whole time. What do you mean? Diana's voice had lost some of its confidence. I mean, I've been recording everything. This conversation, the one in the kitchen tonight, everything. And I've been uploading it to multiple cloud servers in real time. Silence. Heavy, shocked. Oh, Daniel added brightly. And I sent copies to my lawyer, the Cleveland Plain Dealer. And Channel 5 News. Funny thing about being a billionaire, the media takes your calls even at 3 a.m. You wouldn't dare watch me. The story should be breaking on the morning news. Billionaire's wife held captive for 8 years. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Marcus and the guards looked at each other, faltering. Whatever Diana was paying them, it wasn't enough to deal with national media and murder charges. Diana, Daniel said quietly. It's over. The police are here. The media will be here soon. Everyone's going to know what you did. Daniel, Diana's voice was pleading now. Think about what you're doing. The scandal will destroy everything your father worked for. Good, his voice didn't waver. Maybe it's time the Morrison name meant something other than money and corruption. He ended the call and faced the guards. Gentlemen, I strongly suggest you step aside. In about 10 minutes, this place will be crawling with reporters and FBI agents. FBI? Marcus squeaked. Kidnapping across state lines is a federal crime, Rosa explained. So is conspiracy to commit murder. So is holding someone against their will for financial gain. The guards exchanged looks. Then, slowly, they stepped aside. Smart choice, I said, pushing Sarah's wheelchair toward the now unlocked fire exit. But just as we reached the door, Sarah grabbed my hand. Maggie, she whispered. There's something I need to tell you. About what really happened the day I disappeared. About who else was involved. What do you mean, who else was involved? I asked as we hurried down the fire stairs. Sarah's hands were shaking badly, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been since we found her. James didn't work alone, she said. He couldn't have. Someone had to tell him about our family, where we lived, when our parents would be distracted. Rosa stopped on the landing. Sarah, take your time. Tell us what you remember that day. When I was hiding in the backyard, Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Someone called Mom into the house. Said there was an emergency phone call about Grandma being sick. My blood turned to ice. But Grandma died 2 years before that, I know. But Mom didn't question it. She told me to stay put, that she'd be right back. And then, Sarah closed her eyes. A man came to the fence. He knew my name. He said Maggie was hurt, that she was in a car at the hospital and was asking for me. Daniel leaned in. My father? No, this man was younger, dark hair. He said he was a friend of the family, that Maggie was crying for me and we had to hurry. And you went with him? I was 8 years old and scared my sister was dying. Of course I went. Sarah looked at me, tears filling her eyes. I kept asking where you were. He kept promising I'd see you soon. Who made the phone call to Mom? Rosa asked. The one about Grandma being sick? That's what I figured out years later when I started remembering. The voice on the phone was a woman. Mom mentioned it to Dad. Later said something about how the woman knew details about Grandma's medical history. That only family would know. Someone who knew our family well enough to trick Mom. I said. Sarah nodded. Someone who knew when Dad would be at work, when you'd be at soccer practice, when Mom would be home alone with just me. Someone local, I said grimly. More than that, someone Mom trusted enough to leave me unattended based on their word. We reached the ground floor. Rosa cautiously opened the door into the parking lot. All clear, Sarah, I said as we moved toward the cars. Do you remember anything else about this woman? Did Mom ever mention who called? She said. Sarah frowned, concentrating. She said it was strange because the woman called her Margaret instead of Mom, but knew so much about the family. Margaret. Only a few people outside immediate family ever used Mom's full name. Teachers, doctors, and church members. I breathed in sharply. What? Rosa asked. Mom was very active in church. The women's auxiliary, the planning committee. They all called each other by their formal names. Rosa was already taking notes. So we're looking for a woman connected to your family's church, she said. Someone who knew your routines, your family history, and had enough influence to convince a mother to leave her child unattended. But why? Daniel asked. Why would someone from your church help kidnap Sarah? Money, Sarah said simply. James paid them. He had to have. This wasn't random. It was planned, coordinated, professional. How much would someone take to help kidnap a child? Her laugh was bitter. You'd be surprised what people will do for money, especially people who think they'll never get caught. As we reached our cars, Rose's radio crackled. Martinez, what's your status? Package secured and en route. Situation under control. Copy that. Be advised, we have federal agents requesting updates on the Morrison case. Looks like this is going bigger than expected. Sarah looked at Daniel with concern. Are you ready for this? Once the story breaks, your life is going to change completely. It already has, Daniel said. 8 years too late, but it has. The Morrison family will come after you with everything they have, she warned. Lawyers, private investigators, character assassination. They'll say you're mentally unstable, that you're being manipulated. Let them try. I have resources, too. He looked at her steadily. And I have something they don't. What's that? The truth. As we drove away from Pine Haven, I watched the building shrink in the rearview mirror, trying to process everything that had happened. 42 years after losing my sister, I'd found her. But finding her and saving her were two very different things. Maggie, Sarah said softly from the back seat. What if I can't get better? What if 8 years of drugs and isolation have damaged me permanently? I reached back and took her hand. Then we'll deal with that together. But Sarah, you're stronger than they think. You survived 8 years of hell and still remembered who you were. Still remembered me. That's not damage. That's proof of how strong you are. I want to go home. Where's home for you? She was quiet for a long time. I don't know anymore. The house I grew up in with James is full of lies. The house we lived in as children is gone. I don't know where I belong. You belong wherever you're loved, Daniel said from the front seat. And you're loved by me and by Maggie. Everything else we can figure out. My phone rang. Rosa. Double quotes Maggie. We have a problem. Pinehaven is claiming Sarah was taken against her will by armed intruders. They're filing kidnapping charges against all of us. On whose authority? Diana Morrison's. She's claiming we kidnapped a mentally incompetent woman and interfered with her medical treatment. What about the recordings Daniel made? They'll help. But Diana's lawyers are arguing that Sarah was coerced into those statements. While under emotional duress, I looked at Sarah in the rearview mirror. After everything she'd been through, she was about to be dragged through a legal nightmare that could last years. Rosa. What do we need to prove Sarah's competence? Independent psychiatric evaluation, evidence that she's been held against her will, and proof that Diana's guardianship was obtained fraudulently. How long will that take? Months, maybe years. We don't have months. Diana will have Sarah back in an institution within days. Then we need to find proof of the original conspiracy, the woman who made the phone call. Evidence of payment. Something that shows this was a planned kidnapping from the beginning. I thought about what Sarah had remembered. A woman from our church. Someone who knew our family well enough to manipulate Mom. Sarah, what was the name of our church? The one Mom was so active in? St. Matthew's Lutheran. Why? I said, making a U-turn. Because we're about to pay some very old friends a visit. St. Matthew's Lutheran Church looked exactly the same as it had 43 years ago, when our family attended every Sunday. Same red brick, same white steeple, same narrow parking lot where Dad always struggled to fit our old station wagon. The church secretary's office is in the basement, I told Rosa as we approached. If they kept records from the 1980s, that's where they'd be. Sarah was walking under her own power now, though slowly. The fresh air and absence of institutional fluorescent lighting had already improved her color dramatically. Double quotes Maggie, what exactly are we looking for? Daniel asked, church financial records from 1983. If someone was paid to help with Sarah's kidnapping, there might be a record of unusual deposits or expenditures around that time. Rosa raised an eyebrow. You think they'd record payment for a kidnapping in the church books? I think whoever did this wasn't a criminal mastermind. They were probably a normal person who got in over their head and made mistakes. The basement office was unlocked. Small-town churches rarely worried about security in 1980s Ohio, apparently. That hadn't changed much. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, labeled by year and department. Women's Auxiliary 1983. Sarah read from a faded label. That's where Mom would have met most of her church friends. I pulled out the drawer and started flipping through folders, meeting minutes, fundraising records, volunteer schedules. And there, in a folder marked special projects, something made my hands shake. Rosa, look at this. It was a handwritten note. Dated July 10, 1983, 5 days before Sarah disappeared. Emergency Family Assistance Fund activated. $5,000 dispensed to aid the Morrison family crisis. Arranged by E. Patterson, approved by Pastor Williams, posthumously authorized. E. Patterson? Rosa read aloud. Who's E. Patterson? Eleanor Patterson, Sarah said quietly. She was Mom's best friend in the church. They worked together on every committee, every fundraiser. $5,000 in 1983, I said, my voice shaking with rage. That's almost $20,000 today. Eleanor sold my sister for $20,000. Where's Eleanor Patterson now? Rosa asked. Dead, Sarah said. She died about 10 years ago, but her daughter Linda still lives in town. She teaches at the elementary school, the same Linda Patterson I went to high school with, I said. And Maggie, Sarah added. There's something else. Linda was always weird about money, even as a kid. Remember how she always had expensive clothes, new toys, things her family shouldn't have been able to afford? You think Eleanor shared the money with her family? Rosa asked. I think Eleanor used the money to secure her daughter's future. College fund, house down payment. Whatever Linda needed, Rosa was already on her phone. I need an address for Linda Patterson, current residence in the Cleveland area. 20 minutes later, we stood outside a modest ranch house in a middle-class neighborhood. Linda Patterson's white Honda Civic sat in the driveway next to a small garden. That would have made our mother proud. How do we play this? Daniel asked. Carefully, Rosa said. If Linda was complicit in the original kidnapping, confronting her could be dangerous. She was 12 years old, I protested. How complicit could she have been? Old enough to remember, old enough to keep secrets for 40 years, I rang the doorbell. Footsteps approached, and the door opened to reveal a woman I barely recognized. Linda Patterson had aged into a tired-looking middle school teacher with gray-streaked hair and wary, suspicious eyes. Margaret Thompson, she said uncertainly. My God, I haven't seen you since high school graduation. Hello, Linda, this is my sister, Sarah. Linda's face went pale as she looked at Sarah. That's impossible. Sarah died years ago. No, Linda, Sarah was taken. And I think you know exactly how and why. Linda's hand moved toward the door. But Rosa stepped forward, showing her badge. Miss Patterson. I'm Detective Martinez. We'd like to ask you some questions about events in 1983. I don't know what you're talking about. We found the church records. Linda, I said quietly, the emergency fund. Your mother's signature on the authorization. Linda's composure cracked completely. She admitted it had been to help a family in crisis, that someone needed money for medical bills. And you believed her? I asked. I was 12 years old when my mother said we were helping people. I believed her, but you figured it out eventually, Sarah said, speaking for the first time. When did you realize what really happened? Linda looked at Sarah, tears in her eyes. When I was in college. Mom had too much to drink one Christmas and started rambling about mistakes she'd made, children she'd hurt. She said she'd been promised that no one would get hurt, that you were going to a loving family. A loving family? I repeated bitterly. Is that what she called kidnappers? She said James Morrison was wealthy, that he could give you opportunities your real family never could. She convinced herself she was doing a good deed for $5,000. Linda nodded miserably. Mom used the money to send me to private school to pay for college. Everything I have, everything I've accomplished is built on blood money. Rosa stepped forward. Linda, we need you to testify to what your mother told you. Sarah's being held against her will based on false claims about her mental state. If I testify, it'll destroy my career, my reputation. And for what? It won't bring back the years Sarah lost. It'll give her back her freedom, I said fiercely. And it'll make sure the people responsible face justice. The people responsible are dead. My mother, James Morrison, they're all dead. Diana Morrison isn't dead, Daniel said quietly. And she's been continuing her father's crimes for 8 years. Linda looked between us, clearly struggling with her conscience. If I testify, you have to understand. I was a child. I didn't know what was really happening. We understand, Sarah said gently. Linda, I don't blame you for what your mother did. But I need your help to make sure it never happens to anyone else. Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll testify, but I want immunity from prosecution. Done. Rosa said immediately. As we walked back to our cars, Sarah grabbed my hand. Maggie, is it really over? Almost, I said. We still have to deal with Diana's legal challenges, the media circus, all of that. But the truth is out now. Diana can't hide behind lies anymore. What happens to Daniel, to his inheritance? I looked at Daniel, who was talking quietly with Rosa about next steps. I think Daniel's going to be just fine. He's got something worth more than money, integrity, and what about us? What happens to our family now? I squeezed her hand. Now we get to find out who we are when we're not victims or survivors. We get to just be sisters again. My phone rang. It was Detective Martinez. Maggie, turn on Channel 5. The story's breaking now. I pulled up a news app and clicked the live stream. A perfectly coiffed anchor was speaking directly into the camera. Good morning. I'm reporting on a breaking story out of Cleveland involving allegations of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and a decades-long conspiracy involving one of Ohio's wealthiest families. As the reporter continued detailing the evidence we'd uncovered and Linda's forthcoming testimony, I realized it was really happening. After 42 years, the truth was finally coming out, and in related news, the anchor continued. Diana Morrison was arrested early this morning on charges of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conspiracy. She's being held without bail pending a federal investigation into the Morrison family's business practices. Sarah started crying, not tears of sadness, but of relief. It's really over, she whispered. Yes, I said, putting my arms around her. It's really over, and we're really free. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new house, a modest place we'd bought together with money from the settlement. Daniel had insisted we accept. Sarah was making coffee, her hands steady now that she'd been off the psychiatric medications for months. Maggie, she said, do you think we'll ever be normal? I laughed. Sarah, we were never normal. We're sisters who found each other across 42 years, across time zones, across more trauma than most people see in a lifetime. Normal is overrated. What's not overrated? She asked. Family, I said simply. Love, the truth. Those things are priceless. She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her since we were children. Maggie, yeah? Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for staying alive long enough for me to find you outside. Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. He came for dinner every Sunday, now a tradition. We'd started to rebuild the family bonds that lies and money had nearly destroyed. Aunt Maggie. He called as he came through the door. Mom, something amazing happened today, he added. Hugging Sarah. What's that? She asked, eyes shining. The Morrison Foundation's first shelter for missing children opened this morning, he said, his smile radiant. 40 beds, fully staffed, state-of-the-art facilities. It's called Sarah's House. Tears pricked my eyes. From hardware store owner to kidnapping victim to billionaire's aunt to survivor, my life had taken turns I never could have imagined. But sitting in this kitchen with my sister and nephew, all of us free, safe, and together, I realized something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well. And we were finally, truly living. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.